Hey guys, Tommy Kerrigan with Tommy Untamed. We've got a great show coming up. Thank you for watching. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tommy Untamed. We're going to take a quick break and give a shout out to the sponsors who support the show and make it possible. The world's smartest investors are not buying oil stocks. They're buying mailbox money or oil royalties instead. I'm talking about passive income that shows up month after month, starting with as little as $25. Visit KerriganOilBoom.com to discover how to tap into monthly royalty checks from America's most productive oil basin. You don't need to be wealthy or connected, you just need a regular brokerage account. That's KerriganOilBoom.com to learn how you could start collecting oil royalty checks every month. Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, 72 servings per pail, 25 years shelf life. I've had the owner Clayton on the show before. He's a God-fearing, America-loving patriot. Get one of these, get a couple of them, throw them in your basement. It's good to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. If you don't want to do that, you can get their seeds. You can plant your own garden, so you don't even have to keep buying them. You can just get the goods and start your own, or you can even get freeze-dried fruits and vegetables like bananas, apples, strawberries, and raspberries. They support the show. It's an honest product. It's a good safety measure to have, and they keep my show free for you. So I'd implore you guys to please go to heavensharvest.com, use the link in the description, promo code TPC. Axios Fitness Coaching is a premium resource for holistic strength and conditioning services. Axios is best known for the Training Club, capital T, capital C, an exclusive community that prioritizes accountability, technique, diet, and nutrition. Everything you need to do to take action against the decay of the modern world. Whether you're looking to improve your physique, build strength, or just take care of your health and fitness, Axios will provide you with a solution that is effective and simple to execute. All you need to do is complete the intake survey, and you can see if you're a good candidate for the training club or any other of the services. And it's going to sponsor the show. So, one company falls off, another one arises. So if you guys like the show, you want to work out, throw the show a couple shekels. Go take the survey. Thank you so much, guys.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a blue room soon. www.blueroom.com.
Every once in a while, I'll do this where I just love it. Is like I'll find like a department or an unofficial industry agency or what, some cybernetic amalgamation of people and policy from like the military industrial complex. And it's not even like a pro con, pro America. It's not, to me, it's just a fascination.
Yeah.
That I'll find a thread every once, and it's the best feeling. And you're like, what is this? And it's like established in 1919, and you're like, what the and you find this whole, it's like finding a new Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. You just get lost in like the DGIA or the NSA Crane Naval Support Activity. It's like where they standardize munitions. You're like, what the fuck? And the DGIA, I think, was because all of our weapons weren't standardized in World War One. And to me, it's just it's finding like it's finding a season of a show you thought you saw everything, and I just love it. And I was looking into like Space Force. Now these were relatively new. It was like 2017, 20, which to me again is like equally as exciting. I'm like, oh, it's like the birth, and it's not a huge thing. It's not Space Force where it's a new agency. It's not DHS where it's a new department. Right. It's just these little things that blossom, and I just love it. The OCD part of me loves it. The preparation, the streamlining, and I just adore it. And so I texted you about that, and because you are my spaceman, and then completely forgot about it like an idiot until you brought it up just now. And so I'm gonna hand it. But yeah, everybody, please go to the description. Please go follow him on Twitter. Please go grab all his books, all that good stuff. And now I'm just gonna hand it over to you, dude.
Yeah, no, thanks again for having me. I think this is like my fifth appearance on the show.
You've been on more than
Um,
that.
it
I think
maybe it's
no,
more
I
than,
think I think you're over
yeah,
like
I guess you're right,
10,
because we
15
did
now.
like,
We've done
we've
all
done
your
like
books. You've
joint,
come on
yeah,
with people before
joint,
now.
yeah,
Yeah,
with
no,
Joe
you're
Kent and Lee
yeah. You've
Slusherman,
moved
and
into
yeah,
the
yeah,
inner
yeah.
circle of
Yeah.
either my the brass of my podcast and or the people who will be brought down in the inevitable RICO charge if the left gets power
Yeah,
again.
well,
So
here I am
yeah,
with more interesting tidbits. Yeah, no, you had asked me to, and I've obviously written about this extensively. Let me just want to bring up the,
yeah.
here they are. Yeah, yeah. So the Space Development Agency (SDA), Space Rapid Capabilities Office, and the Space Systems Command (SSC). So basically, these are the support agencies that are under they're under the umbrella of Space Force, and their entire mission, at least on paper, is to develop the weapons and the systems that Space Force needs to execute its strategy. What is its strategy? Well, Donald Trump, the creator of Space Force, laid it out very clearly at the announcement of Space Force in 2018. He said that the goal is space dominance. There's a lot of debate in the space policy community about what space dominance is. And this is one of the reasons I wrote my book, Winning Space, How America Remains a Superpower. Brian Chow, over at formerly of Rand Corporation, referred to me as the guru of space dominance theory. And basically, space dominance is seeking, as the name suggests, the United States will build the systems and use its power to deploy those systems to ensure that no rival power arises to challenge us in the strategic high ground of space. And so those three offices, very simply, are designed to allow for the Space Force to acquire the tools and technologies needed to accomplish that mission set. Now, that mission went away, not officially, but unofficially, during the Biden regime. President Biden came in and basically started to redirect Space Force away from the Trump era space dominance strategy and toward this sort of ambiguous, I would dare say, just DEI woke agenda, wherein Space Force really just became a diversity jobs program, and they didn't really resource themselves properly. In the last few weeks, the head of Space Force, General Saltzman, actually came out and said under Trump, he said his mouth was, quote, salivating at the prospect of being able to finally acquire the technologies that his agency, the Space Force, needs to accomplish the mission set of
Who
space dominance.
who said that? Sorry, I just had a brain fart.
That's the head of Space Force, General Saltzman is the last name. I think it's like Chaz Saltzman.
Got
He's
it.
got like a funny first name. He's got a very odd name. Chance is his call sign, actually, Chance Saltzman. And I've met him a couple of times briefly, and he's an interesting guy. And he basically was not he wasn't saying openly, but he was implying that the last 4 years
Had their hands tied.
they had their hands tied. And you remember, what were some of the biggest things we knew about Space Force during the Biden years? We had the trans colonel who was running around talking about how men can become women in Space Force. We had another woman general who I actually interacted with, had a very unpleasant interaction with this individual before. She came out, and she's brigadier general, and basically said that she was going to hunt down white supremacism in her ranks. That was her mission. And she was, I think, the head of operations. I think she was somebody high up with Space Force, and she said that in 2023. And so, finally, we have in Trump again, his second term, the Space Force is being put back on its original mission of space dominance. And those offices that you mentioned, their whole job is to go forward and to give the tools and technologies necessary for achieving this goal. And already, by the way, the Russians in the last 48 hours, the news was broken. This is not being widely reported. It is being reported in the foreign press, but not in the Western corporate press. So maybe this is kind of breaking news for your show. The Space Force did say they detected a group of Russian co-orbital satellites practicing in low Earth orbit, physically surrounding and isolating a targeted satellite. Now, this was part of a Russian test, so they were doing it to a derelict Russian satellite, but this was being done in clear view of U.S. Space Force surveillance, and it was a clear signal from Moscow to Washington that we have the ability with these small co-orbital satellites to target a sensitive U.S. satellite system, surround it with our co-orbital satellites, and either destroy that system or tap into that system or do something to disrupt that system's normal operations. And that is space warfare today. And those offices we're talking about, part of their job is to be able to create workarounds and defenses for our existing satellites, as well as to create new systems to be able to implement space dominance.
Whoa, that's wild. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it it is the old, which it's like such like a odd dichotomy of, on one hand, as like a hegemon, you got to be able to squash shit like the Houthis, to like
yeah,
the next level up. It's like, yeah, the cartels on the southern border, they're not ragtag. They got a good industry going, all the way up to like near peer competitor. Like, are they using electromagnetic weapons in high orbit? It's the whole gambit.
right,
You can't,
right.
right? You're playing whack a mole with like a mallet as well as like a neurosurgeon's like
Yes,
femto laser.
yes, exactly. You're
It's
right.
wild.
You're
No,
right.
just, yeah, just not
And
really
and the
comment
fact of the
on it.
matter is that Space Force, and I said this in my book, and not much has changed. Space Force basically is underfunded. Now, during the Biden years, I was fine with it being underfunded because I knew that that money, if they got more of it, was going to be used for DEI woke garbage. But now under Trump, I think that the president really needs to put in a request to Congress for a significant budget increase for Space Force, for them to be able to dominate space. And this is a controversial thing even in the Pentagon, because let's face it, there's a lot of, and you and I've spoken about this before, a lot of people in the Air Force, which is the umbrella agency overseeing Space Force, a lot of them do not want to see Space Force get too big because they fear that that will not only impose on their jurisdiction, but it will also divert much needed money away from the Air Force to the Space Force, which it will. And so there is still, since the beginning of Space Force, there has been this ongoing bureaucratic turf war. And the Space Force has done what it can to kind of partner with the Air Force rather than be seen as an adversary. But ultimately, the Air Force does not want to share their piece of the pie too much with Space Force. And there's also a cultural difference. The Space Force really needs to kind of get the woke nerds out, and they need to put in real warfighters. And I think they're starting to do that. And I think that might also alleviate some of the turf war, because I've talked to a lot of Air Force guys who are very anti-Space Force, not because of the budget issue, but because they don't think they can trust the Space Force to actually have their back in space during a fight.
Why would that be? That's a wild statement. I get
Well,
turf wars, I get budget, I get all that
yeah.
fucking shit,
So
but
what this one colonel was telling me, and this was back in, I want to say probably Biden's first or second year. This was like when Biden was really powerful. In his last 2 years, he kind of waned, not just mentally, but the power was kind of waning. But in his initial year or two, he did have a lot of, his people had a lot of influence. What this colonel was telling me, and this was at a speech I gave for a joint Space Force Air Force audience. The Air Force guys were almost giving me a standing ovation for what I was talking about space dominance. The Space Force guys got very offended, and one in particular, who was a brigadier general, this bald guy, stood up and started just yelling at me. He left the room, and after I spoke, this colonel came up to me and he said, "You just saw the real problem here with why us Air Force guys don't get along with the Space Force. A lot of the Space Force guys." I said, "I don't really understand it." He said, "For whatever reason, the Space Force has elevated people into positions of power who do not actually want more responsibility. That they actually, for instance, there was this thing with um, they wanted to use, I think it was SpaceX, the reusable rockets. They wanted to look into using it for doing resupply into combat zones. They basically would pre-position
Mm-hmm.
um, supplies in orbit,
Oh,
and
that's
the
awesome. That's
yeah, this was yeah, and so this was under Biden. The Secretary of the Air Force actually was like gung ho about this. Like this could really help
um,
special
me
forces.
and my buddies were playing Helldivers right now, Helldivers 2, and the entire thing is you call them, you have a little thing on your wrist, and you can call in heavy machine shit that you can't carry. You can call in
Right,
heavy
that's
machine
right.
guns, you can call in ammo,
So
you can go,
yeah,
and it comes down in a pod and it slams into the
that's
ground.
right. Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly. And so this was something they were exploring in 22 or 23 at the Air Force Research Lab out west. And the Air Force Secretary, I think it was
so
Kendall,
fucking cool.
was like all gung ho, like, yeah, let's let her rip. And he went to the Space Force guys and they were like, guys, take the lead on this. And the Space Force guys basically sat there telling him how it couldn't be done. It's not worth the time. Don't worry about it. So basically, the Air Force started intervening and saying, actually, we're gonna explore this further at the Air Force level. And that was part of this. So this colonel was telling me this story, and there was another thing with refueling, and I can't really remember what he was. It was so long ago, but basically, this guy was saying that there is a cadre of Air Force officers who are very gung ho about space, and they don't feel like the Space Force guys are as gung ho about it as they are, and that there is this sort of reticence on their part to trust the Space Force to actually develop a lot of these innovative programs.
Why?
Because in the case of that drop pod
Resupply,
thing,
yeah.
yeah, there was immediate pushback. The Space Force bureaucracy was saying, no, we can't do it, can't be
Why?
done. Well, I think this goes back
Is it
to
just is it just leftovers from the last administration who's
I think this goes back to
broad
yeah,
brushing is America
yeah.
bad?
Well, that too, and that's another story. But I think this goes back to the kinds of people the Biden regime elevated were what we would call midwits. They were people who, they were not great intellects. They were not very bold people. They were bureaucrats at heart. And what is a bureaucrat's job? It's to say no and to collect a paycheck for as long as possible. And so that's a lot of the kinds of people that were brought in under the Biden regime into Space Force, and so they didn't have that get up and go mentality in many cases. Not all of them. There was a handful of people I've interacted with who are amazing. Another story, and I might have shared this with you before, but just to kind of show you the Biden regime on display. In the first year of Biden, I was asked to go speak at an event for Space Force, and I did, and it was kind of to promote my book. And I started talking about space dominance theory, and I gave a very academic explanation of it. I thought it was a very dry explanation because you can't get too racy with these people because then that's political. And so I kept it as very even as possible. And I was pulled aside afterward by this woman, this colonel, who went on to become a brigadier general in the Space Force. And she said, "I'm Mr. Weichert." She goes, "I just want to let you know, just so you understand, I'm actually going to be writing you up. I'm complaining to my commanding officer about your talk." And I said, may I ask why? And she said, "The reason I'm doing this is because you use the term space dominance." And I said, "Right." And she said, "Well, that is a banned term in the Biden administration, and
Dumb,
that
dumb.
should have been given, that information should have been shared with you." I said, "I was never told about banned terms." And she said, "We don't like that term." And I
You
said, "May I ask
dumb.
why?" "That's the theory. That's what it's called. The Chinese, they call it space. Why?" And so she says to me, she said, "Well, because it evokes it evokes a negative memory of America's colonial past. And then here's the kicker. She says, and it is far too heteronormative
You
of a
dumb
term."
fucking cunt. Excuse me.
And I sat there and I said, "I don't know. What do you mean it's too heteronormative?"
It should remind you of America's imperialism and
That's right.
colonialism, because we're
That's
gonna
right.
do it again.
That's
That's
right.
what runs the world, you dumb bitch. If it's
Right.
not us,
And
it's someone
she's a
else.
senior and she's a senior person at Space Force now. So when
Oh,
I talk to these Air Force guys, The ones who aren't pissed off about Space Force possibly taking their slice of the pie, which they need to get over that. The ones who tell me like she's the reason why we don't trust Space Force, I kind of get it. I
Yeah,
kind of get it. You
yeah,
know,
no, it's yeah. Tell that to the next imperialist power that occupies your country when
well, this
you've
is the
given
thing.
up power.
China,
Well, excuse
China
me, Mister
openly,
Xi
right,
Jinping. I don't
right.
like that. Against the wall, boom, blow
That's
your
right.
brains
That's
out.
right. China
Mothers.
openly refers to this as space dominance in their white
Why
paper.
wouldn't you? It's a word.
It's a word. It makes sense. It's an easy word to understand. You know exactly what it means, and they don't like that, and they don't want to deal with that. And I'm going to tell your audience right now: if we don't take space fully, somebody else will, and it's
Why
going to be somebody
wouldn't
we don't get
they?
along with.
Why would
You know,
it's the entire history
that's right.
of the planet. There's
That's right.
never a moment where that just goes away. It
That's right.
no, it's all it's just what it. You don't have to like it. You're you can have a nuanced view and be like, listen, it's no objectively. If the world was perfect, sure, there wouldn't be imperial. We'd all hold hands and sing kumbaya. You're allowed to be like, yeah, I get that.
Right.
No one wants to see anybody die. Some people do, and
Right. Right.
that being said, you're also
Yeah.
being there's no nobility in ignoring reality.
Well,
There's no nobility in letting
that's
a
right.
warring tribe come in and kill your men, rape your women, and enslave your children.
That's right.
You can go, man. I wish we didn't live in a world where we have to kill. That being said, this is
Right.
my clan. They're coming in, and God is my witness. I didn't
Right.
want to do this, but I will do it. No, it's like I have a gun. I don't want to
Right.
blast anybody, but I do have it in case anybody doesn't value their life. And
That's right.
it's there's no nobility in saying, well, it's bad. It's yeah, sure, it is bad. No one wants to die. I get it.
Right. And you have to remember
Slice,
also,
stop it. Sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. You have to remember also spaces where a lot of new technologies go to be taken to their limits.
Yeah.
And like artificial intelligence, I really think that whether you're pro or anti, and I have a lot of concerns about AI, but the one thing I can tell you is it's really not going to start being rapidly streamlined until I think we figure out how to deploy it in space and use it to get people to the moon and Mars more safely, until we figure out how to use it to get mining going in space, to get those rare earth minerals out in the asteroid belt and on the moon. And space is going to be the domain. It's going to be the domain where that technology and similar technologies are taken and really put into scalability.
And also
Because that
for the record, I'm speaking for myself and not Brandon.
oh
I don't want somebody to be like, well, Brandon called. No, 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 that's me. That's me independently. I'm I, I'm an idiot. If we're willing to talk in 20 minutes, I already got to pay. Tell everybody where to find you.
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at We the Brandon. I'm also technically on Truth Social and Getter under that same handle. I do not really use those though. And you can find my work, all four of my books, at Amazon or wherever books are sold. The book that we're talking about really right now is Winning Space: How America Remains a Superpower, and they're supposed to be working on an updated version for paperback. I don't know what the status of that is, but I do know that it has been in the works, and so we're going to be seeing that probably in the next year come out, and it really walks the reader through not only the American strategic position in space, which has been declining for quite some time, but it also shows you other countries, what they're doing in space, notably China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, but also allied countries like India, like Israel, Brazil, and France as well. And some of those countries, what they're doing, and how we can use those countries to expedite and continue our space dominance in the high ground. The key thing to understand when we talk about space dominance, and we call it hegemonic. You can say that, but of course, as we've seen, hegemony is not just exclusive to the Americans. You need to have willing partners, and that's why I point out, Japan and Israel and Brazil and some of these other countries that are allied with us and what they're doing in space at cost. It's a great way to expand our own hold on space for cheap.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. So to kind of pivot from there, How does that tie in then with these agencies, these support things in terms of, the new administration coming in and being I mean, I'd imagine that. I mean, that's combat effectiveness. That would be something that you'd want to
Yeah.
iron out immediately, right? The fact that the Air Force doesn't feel like Space Force has their back in war.
So
That's like the Marines being like, I don't know if that aircraft
yeah,
carrier is going to help us. Like,
yeah,
what the?
yeah. And I don't know if that's representative of the entire Air Force and the
Sure.
entire space, but just the people that and those were fairly senior people. Um, Matt Lohmeyer was made the Secretary of the Air Force. Matthew Lohmeyer, or I think it was Secretary of Air Force. He was the guy that wrote Irresistible or Unstoppable Revolution. It was about how Marxism through DEI teachings at Space Force were taking over. That book went, I don't know, maybe you had him on at one point.
No, is that the guy
Um,
with that viral video of him like talking to Trump about
yeah,
like
yeah, that's him. That's Matt.
the
Yeah,
yeah
I know Matt. Yeah,
the dude looks like
yeah.
a male model. Fuck that
Yeah,
guy.
he was an F-16, he was F-16 fighter pilot. I told him last time I haven't spoken to him since he was nominated, and how this works is I know a lot of these guys going in and then they can't talk to me anymore
Yeah,
once
no,
they
I
get it.
have that too. Which to me,
You
it's
know,
it's
yeah,
bittersweet. I'm like, I
it
want to have him
is.
on the show, but part of me is just like,
Well, it's not even a question.
I'm like,
Yeah,
you made it, you
yeah,
made
it's
it.
not even a question of having them do anything for me with my writings or anything. It's just I used to talk to these
Yeah,
guys,
no,
and
no, same. No,
you
I'm
know,
like,
and
I'm like waving from the shore. I'm like,
yeah,
Godspeed,
yeah.
son.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So I didn't know Lohmeyer that well, but we have exchanged messages. And one of the last things I forgot now where I was going with this, but one of the last things I had said to him was I had shared these stories with him, and he told me basically it was a lot worse than even that from his experience. Oh, that's what the thing I was about Lohmeyer is I don't think he remembers, but I actually when he was still in, he came out to a briefing I gave in DC, and uh, he came out and basically was in the audience, and I met him before when before all the stuff happened where he was fired for standing up to the vaccine and the DEI stuff at Peterson Air Force or Space Force Base. But he used to be an F-16 pilot, and so yeah, he looks the part. He's straight out of Central Casting, which Trump loves.
Yeah.
And he's great. So he understands it. I know he understands a lot of the kind of cultural shifts going on and the issues there, and the fact that he's overseeing both Air Force and Space Force. I think we're in good hands. I don't know if they filled in the job yet for Assistant Secretary of the Air of Defense for the space policy. I know there's a woman who's a holdover who's running it, which is very problematic for me. Um, they need to get that spot resolved quickly, and but you know that they're making moves, and the fact that Space Force is Trump's baby, I hope that means that he's going to take it very seriously because our enemies are catching up to us in space significantly even now. One other thing that's interesting, apparently, and this is what gives me hope also, not just Lohmeyer being there, but the fact that Elon Musk is basically the shadow president in many respects. I mean, obviously, that he's the guy keeping us in the space race
Yeah.
right now, his company, SpaceX. And so, and in fact, Isaacson I believe was confirmed as you might need to look into this. I know he was nominated. I don't know if he was confirmed. NASA's director for Trump is a guy named Isaacson, Jared Isaacson, but he was mission commander for the SpaceX mission to the Van Allen belt. So he's actually an astronaut. And
Oh.
so and this is important because the last several administrators of NASA, Bill Nelson, you could say technically he was an astronaut, but he's very, but for the most part, we've not had actual young astronauts who've run the agency. It's all been bureaucrats, and NASA's shown that. And so the fact that you have somebody so close to SpaceX getting nominated, and you have Elon having such an outsized presence in the administration day to day, I think this means that we're going to be taking overall space policy, not just the military, but civilian, much more seriously than we have in probably decades.
It's also it's just it. I mean, just the general idea of space, Dom. It's simply the newest manifestation and the
Yeah,
newest semantic term of just cutting edge power projection. That's all. It's no different than
Yeah.
the musket or the Gatling gun or a balloon to look at enemy soldiers.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
it's the next thing, and
It's the next
it
thing.
always takes a new form. And I mean, the last really, I don't know, maybe I'd say the last huge one was, I don't know, maybe drones. Before that, perhaps stealth like F-117
Yeah.
B-2. Prior to that, probably like ICBM technology, and before that, hydrogen bomb. Before that, atomic bomb. Before that, I don't know, aircraft carriers maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you could say really the advent of steel and how that
Sure,
affected.
but my
Yeah.
point is it'll go forever, and
Yeah.
so it's not some weird thing of like, oh, you guys are just geeking on space.
Yeah.
No, it's a broader idea of it's
Well,
just the
yeah.
newest form of power projection, and so you
Well,
have to throw
in
a
my
ton of
book, I
fucking yeah,
liken, yeah, in my book, I liken it to the age of sail, right? I mean, you
yeah.
started out with the Portuguese, little Portugal, and Henry the Navigator, and they basically initiated the entire age of sail, where the European empires arose and they started projecting their power into the New World. The discovery of the Americas completely
Yes.
fundamentally changed the way humanity existed, particularly the Europeans. In fact, I see, and I say this in the book, I see a lot of similarity between Henry the Navigator's Portugal and America in the sense that they had this leader who believed in exploration and believed that sea dominance was the key to Portuguese greatness. And when he died, his successors did not believe that. They didn't share that belief. They wanted to focus more on things at home. They wanted to focus more on countering neighboring Spain and preventing Muslim armies, the Ottomans from coming in. And so they ended up actually, all of that advanced shipbuilding. Portuguese were the greatest shipbuilders in the world. They had a monopoly of that information. The successors to Henry the Navigator allowed for those shipbuilders in Portugal to start selling their trades to the Spanish and to other rival powers, which actually sparked the rise of other rival states that ultimately got the better of Portugal. Several hundred years later, but ultimately the Portuguese stopped being the dominant sea power because of the fact that they didn't guard those secrets and they didn't maintain that dominance beyond a single generation, really. And so the same thing's happening in the United States. When we come out of the Cold War, we're the undisputed power in space. And that starts to rapidly change beginning in the 2000s, really. 2003, China does their first spacewalk. 20 years later, they have their own space station in orbit that's more advanced than the ISS, that's going to last longer than the ISS. They have
I
a
didn't even
space.
know. I feel
Yeah.
so retarded. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, get this, it's a military space station too. It is explicitly
Yeah, like
militarized.
MOL, whatever the one that we tried to
Oh, the
do.
manned orbital laboratories. Yeah. And so I have a whole
Look it up.
chapter on
China
them.
space station.
It's the CSS, Chinese Space Station is what it's called in the media. It's I think it's called the Tianzia is what they call it, which is all under heaven. I think it's called Tianzia.
Heavenly Palace.
Heavenly Palace, right. Yeah.
I had no.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I feel pretty stupid right now.
Yeah, it was launched, I think, in 2020 or 2021, and it replaced their older temporary module, or wasn't even modular. It was like a very, very slapdash system they had up there. They were just testing and learning on, sort of like their
12,000
aircraft
cubic feet.
carrier. Yeah.
Jeez.
And the Russians are talking about separating from the ISS and going over to the Chinese space station. And so, what I see today is a similar situation arising in space to what happened to Portugal in with sea power, where just like us, they were the dominant power and they had access to the rest of the world that many European powers could not gain access to because they didn't have as good of shipbuilding capabilities. And then ultimately the Portuguese let that slip away. And that's similar to what we were doing with NASA and with space in general, until really 2010, when Elon Musk comes along and revolutionizes the way the space industry operates, notably for military space stations and not space stations, military satellite operations. Because basically, one of the biggest problems we had was cost. Everything's too expensive in space. So what Elon did was he brought the cost down by having reusable rockets, by promoting ride sharing programs for satellites, that's forcing the military to actually adapt their old satellite design, which was a disaster, and they're making those satellites now smaller and more interoperable with civilian systems and able to be launched from civilian rockets, which is drastically lowering the costs. And in theory, the money that the military program is saving on space launches could then be redirected into new innovations for the military space program. That's sort of 2010 is a real game changer when Obama started letting Elon Musk bid SpaceX bid for contracts. And there was a fight. The Air Force fought him on it. They didn't want him in. They don't like startups. What was it? The chief of staff for the Air Force, I think, was Schwartz at the time. And he was yelling about in the press how he didn't trust Elon Musk. He didn't want to entrust the quote crown jewels of the Air Force to some foreigner. This is what he said to the press. They had to sue their way in. There was a lot of shenanigans. The ULA, United Launch Alliance, Boeing, and Lockheed really tried some borderline illegal tactics to strong arm SpaceX out of the business early on. They failed. And Elon has just, and so his role in the Trump administration, not just at Doge, but he clearly is having significant influence with space in general. That's going to be very important for keeping us competitive, because if it's left up to the government, we will not be competitive. They will let us slide, and a more dominant power will arise, or more innovative power like China will arise. And interestingly, yesterday or this morning, Elon Musk is apparently, after Trump's call with Putin, had a phone call with his counterpart in Russia, the head of the Russian Space Agency, which is something that has been not allowed for the last 4 years because of the Ukraine war. Elon has not really been able to have direct contacts with his Russian counterparts. People don't realize how much business SpaceX was doing in terms of technology and research.
Because we were riding the Soyuz forever. I mean, it was
right. Yeah, exactly. And so Elon Musk was able yesterday, after Putin and Trump spoke, he was able to speak with Putin and his space people about conducting a joint SpaceX Russian or Roscosmos manned mission to Mars within the next few years.
I'm sure that's going over well with the fucking
psychopaths
in the U.S.
That's right. Right. Well, Russia is technically the second most potent space power behind us.
Of course they are.
We are a declining number one space power. China's technically number three, but with the amount of money and the very high-tech sector that China has, it's only a matter of time before they outpace everybody. And until yesterday, the fear was becoming real that China and Russia were going to fuse their space programs together, and that would have completely ended America's dominance in space. Now there might be a chance for at least space
that apart.
Yeah.
No, it's in general. I think what you said about Portugal is what hits the nail on the head. I know for me at least, and I don't know if this is what the naysayers feel, but I can at least kind of understand it at face value. It does feel abstract to be like, we got to have space dominance in order. If you know nothing about it, or even if you know a little about it, it's a little abstract. You're like, I don't get it. That's not artillery shells. That's not ammo. That's not tanks. But it is in terms of how these things progress and these systems progress, like sail, right? It starts with like a almost exploratory, like proof of concept, entirely funded. It's not profitable at all. Most of the time, everybody dies.
Yep.
No different than space, but as you start needling away at it, it stops becoming some state only thing, and then it starts to have actual return on investment.
Right.
You're like, oh, we're not just sailing and making new maps.
Right.
We found some spices over here, and then you go, oh, and then you have to kind of keep going along that line. And at the time, again, I'm sure if you went back in time and you're like, sail is the future, people are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, the church runs the world. What are you talking about? And so, like, I do, I guess, understand that, where it does seem abstract. You're like,
it does.
You're like, what? You're like the little, you just have the idea of like the satellite. You're like, what, the thing with the antenna? How the fuck is that gonna? What do you mean that's dominance? And by the time you understand why it's dominance, it's too late and you've been usurped. But
Yeah.
it always is the next bleeding edge of pushing forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the reason I wrote the book was I was trying to bring that reality to the person who would sit down and read it. This is why I didn't go with an academic publisher. This is why I didn't try to make it an academic book. I tried to make it a very readable, you know, kind of like a pop culture book without it being fiction. And you know, it's been well received because it is, if you actually read it, it's actually readable. It's not this kind of, you know, impenetrable science jargon text. One of the things I try to make clear is everybody kind of knows about satellites, and that's the near term, but it isn't just the satellite threat. Obviously, if we lose our satellites, we're deaf, dumb, and blind on Earth. We'll lose a war. We lose those satellites, which is why China and Russia, since 2010, have reorganized their space forces to be able to defeat the United States in a satellite war.
Yeah, sat killers.
Sat killers. Yeah. Oh, there's a whole variety of systems. But when you look at the beyond that and you say, well, why is China talking about annexing the South Pole of the moon for a human settlement that would be exclusive to China? Well, that is a part of the moon that is habitable, relatively speaking. It's a part of the moon that you could put solar collectors on. It can collect continuous energy if they go with solar energy, which they probably would. It also, they believe, has ice there that they could. What's that?
I was gonna say helium-3.
Helium. Well, that's the big one.
Yeah.
So we know that China has right now, they have the hottest burning tokamak reactor, and that's a nuclear fusion device. Nuclear fusion is believed. I mean, even talk to our friend Ashton Forbes, he'll give you a whole discourse on nuclear fusion and sort of the importance of nuclear fusion. And now big technology is getting involved with artificial intelligence, and you're hearing guys like Eric Schmidt no longer poo-pooing the concept of nuclear fusion, but now saying if we don't get nuclear fusion, we're not going to have AI. We're not going to have these things. We need that power. So China has been quietly building the most sophisticated nuclear fusion research facilities in the world, and they now have the hottest burning nuclear fusion reactor. There's still a lot more to do. But the thing is, nuclear fusion, as we have tried it on Earth, relies on deuterium-tritium reactions. This is a complicated, expensive, complex method. The belief is if you can get an isotope that is found only on places like the moon that don't have an atmosphere, helium-3, H3, the belief is that if you do that, and I think it would be deuterium helium-3, you remove the tritium, I think is the formula, that basically you could create with a canister of maybe yay big of refined helium-3, you could you create a reactor that could run on that, and you would have limitless clean energy of the nth degree, powering cities the size of Shanghai or Manhattan without any interruption for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And so
it's end game shit. It
is end game shit. And this is why China has been so heavily invested in nuclear fusion research, because they understand space. They understand their plan to get to the moon. They know there's helium-3 there in the regolith there, the sand. They know that if they can get there and they can start mining and refining it, then it's just a question of how do they get it down to Earth in a costly manner.
Yeah.
Because that's a very different formulation than what we're talking about today, which is it even there? Should we even go there? You know, the conversation we're having in America is still very rudimentary compared to where China is moving. And China's saying that by 2032, they will have operations set up on the moon. So, you know, we're far behind the curve.
Yeah. Now that is kind of like one thing that is, I guess, almost, for lack of a better word, optimistic about seeing all these fucking crazy people lighting Teslas on fire is you see that the climate change pawn is negotiable. That they don't actually care, which to me is like they're all crazy. They're all crazy, sure, but in terms of like higher level, and then also that article by Leopold Aschenbrenner about situational awareness and like knowing where we are at the lip of the singular or the AI war is all these heads, you know, Bezos, Schmidt, Sergey Brin, and they're all talking about how like, listen, well, you might need to loosen up the regulations on nuclear power and fossil fuels because that's how we got to fund AI. And when I see that, I'm just like, there you go. There, it's
Well,
either you don't believe climate change,
right,
or let's say it's 100. Let's just say hypothetically climate change is 100% real and it's caused by man. Even with that, they're going, well, even if that was the case, there's a more eminent threat, which
yes,
is losing strong AI, AGI, and
right,
super AI to China. So all of this is you kind of seeing being like, oh, we can't,
right,
we're gonna be fucking bulldozed. And you
yeah,
see how it was more of a, it was a fashionable and self-serving mask to wear it. But now they're going, we can't do this. So I kind of like it that it's like
yeah,
AI and orbital warfare is making them go, hey, cut the shit with the fucking geothermal windmill bullshit.
right,
We need fusion. We need fucking antimatter,
right.
anti-proton react.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm
I well,
happy.
you're right. This is a point that I made the other day on a phone call. Eric Schmidt was one of the biggest purveyors of global warming and the need to make big tech develop alternative energies. And he is now the first guy out of the gate. And this is why I think they took down his speech at Stanford last year. You can't find it anymore on the internet because in that speech, he essentially said, global warming is over. We are now going full bore with and the reason is because he's realizing the money making opportunity of AI and the attendant energy and infrastructure is far greater than the money making he was enjoying off of the global warming scam. And it
Yeah.
was a scam. That
Yeah.
is biggest voices in left wing big tech Silicon Valley are now the loudest proponents of saying we got to do away with the global warming
It
policies
is
because
amazing.
and it just shows you it was all about money. They
Of
were all on
course.
the take. They were all being paid by the left and these groups on the left to promote this narrative. But now the money is too great in AI. It outstrips their money they were making from the global warming stuff.
Yeah. And it is like, I know there's a bunch of like, see, they're hip. I'm like, I don't care about the own,
Well, they are
own the.
hypocrites
Yeah,
because
but at
they're
the
they're
same, I'm the
they're
same.
they're robber barons. They
Yeah,
don't
but at the same
care.
time, it's nothing. It's not you. It's just nothing. It's
Yeah.
nothing I haven't heard 100 trillion
Oh yeah.
times. The left, I'm like, shut the fuck. I'm more fascinated at the bigger picture of like,
Right.
let's get some
Yeah.
nuclear reactors going, or
Well, and this is
every
this
state needs a couple. Let's go.
That's right. Well, and you mentioned geothermal, and it's interesting because actually geothermal is one of those
I was gonna say
those
that maybe wasn't a good example.
well, because it's one of those alternative energies that actually might be good for power generation and affordability. And it's one of those alternative energies that the left never wanted to talk about. They always wanted to talk about wind and solar, terrestrial based solar. They always want to talk about those two things. And those are the two things that even Eric Schmidt now is saying it doesn't work. It can't
Yeah.
supply. Interestingly, one of the reasons we're going to be absorbing Canada is because of the geothermal. They have some of the
Hmm.
largest geothermal energy deposits are located in middle Canada and northern Canada. And the reason that Trump is so gung ho, I think, about absorbing Canada, or at least Alberta and Saskatchewan and some of them, is because the tech bros are in his ear saying, we need geothermal as well as nuclear fusion and all the others, but we need it from Canada because they have such a large amount of it up there and it's so easy to access. And there's very few spots on the earth where it's as easy to access in abundance geothermal energy. And so we are looking at not only the end of global warming as a theory, but we're also looking at the end of Canada probably,
Yeah.
partly because of the need for AI power generation.
Sacrifice I'm willing to make. It is. It is.
Me too.
There is just something like, I don't know. There is something great about just seeing like how much better we all operate under the threat of war. Like
Yeah.
there is something just kind of funny about that. Or like
Yeah.
even myself, like I'll have an off day or I'll take an off week or something over Christmas. And it's all well and good the first, couple days, sleep in, eat your body weight in brownies. And then I'll find, I'll be playing a video game or I'll be playing cards with my brother. And like very quickly, I'll start to see it as like a challenge to get better at. And
Yeah.
like it's like a little light bulb turns on and it like
Yeah.
sparks you up. And like you're at mom and dad's house over Christmas break. You don't have to do anything. I'm already just the very concept of
Yeah.
scheming anything to beat someone else. I sit up straight a little more. I'm like, what is
Yep.
this? And it is kind of, it's, it's the second it's like, hey, China might get this AI and they're going to space. Instantly, you see just all the horse shit drop, and it's like, all
Yep.
right, we need tokamak reactors. We need to be
Yep.
in orbit. We got to be going
Yep.
a decent fraction of the speed of light. What do you got in DARPA? And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's like, accept what you are. We are this
Yeah.
like warring, competing species, and it's amazing, and I
Well,
love it.
and it also gets scary in this way though, because now we're waking up under Trump and we're realizing the elite in the United States, both parties that have been running the show, have been lying to us even about our military capabilities. And what I mean by that is the Ukraine war has done one thing very well. It has exposed the fact that the defense industrial base from Los Angeles all the way to Lisbon in Europe, the Western defense industrial base is broken.
Can't
The
produce shit. It's
can't
not.
produce
Yeah,
shit.
yeah. The
And this is
facade is
something that
fallen.
my old buddy Mark Rutte, who's the NATO chief, he even had to admit to in January when he said that the Russian, who we are told, the Russian, remember McCain was running around, John McCain before he died, well, Russia's really just a giant gas station with an army. Well,
Gas
no,
station with
actually,
nukes.
nukes, yeah. Well, actually, that's not true.
No,
They're
no,
more
they
than
are
that
cranking out
because it
artillery
turns
shells.
out, yeah, it turns out that their defense industrial base, according to Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, they are able to produce in 3 months what it takes an entire year for the NATO defense industrial base to produce. And when you pair that with the fact that, and I just did an article at the National Interest that's going to be coming out probably on Friday, the Satan II nuclear missile that Russia has, it is widely now admitted to be the single best intercontinental ballistic missile in the world. It was developed in 2010, so it's a relatively new system. The American Minuteman II nuclear missile, which is very old, they're trying to replace it with
The
the
Sentinel.
Sentinel.
Yeah, the Sentinel.
Ain't going to happen. Sentinel is 80% over budget. It has triggered the Nunn-McCurdy Act, which basically means immediate congressional investigation because it's gone more than 50% over budget. There's no way this thing is getting made. And now we're looking around and we're going, holy shit, the Russians have more nukes. They have larger number of nukes than we do. And now it turns out their nukes that they have are more advanced than the ones that we have. And oh, by the way, the Satan II missile can operate with their hypersonic weapon, which means we have no active defense against. So we are now waking up.
Yeah.
Right. In this case, it's the Avangard. It's the Avangard. It's another variant. The Oreshnik is different. But the point is now the Russians are so advanced with hypersonic, they have multiple variations of these things. They've got the Avangard for nukes. They've got the Oreshnik. They've got the cruise missiles that can pop off from the, I think it's is it the Yazan M or the Borai, one of the two submarines that the new subs. We don't even have this stuff. So we're waking up, and I think this waking up is one of the things you're seeing now. Even leftists in big tech are coming around with Elon and Peter Thiel to saying, you know what, drop global warming. We need to start focusing on preparing to take space, being competitive with China and Russia, because we are not anymore.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a good, we can't undo everything. We can't go back in time. We're here today,
No.
March 19th, 18th, 19th, 2025. You can't go backwards. It's good that we're waking up to it. Better now than, say, 2027 during, I don't know, the Battle of LA, where we go, oh,
Yeah.
we don't, I'd rather have it now. Not good. It's certainly not good at all. That being said, this is where we are. We've got to move forward. It's not the end of the world. We got to move forward, right? And if anything, just like, hey, be happy that we're getting this stimulus where you wake up and it's like, hey, yeah, no, it's not the meme of like a babushka with an AK.
Right.
Like, yeah, no, they're not. Hey, guess what? They're not knuckle dragging retards. A lot of the world is, and sure, you can write them off like that. We don't need to be worried about, I don't know, an Afghanistan space program. Agreed.
No.
But you can't say that, oh, it's stupid Ruski. It's like, hey man, you don't have to like them. You can be pro anti Ukraine,
The,
Putin, what
the
all that aside, in terms of just like brass tacks,
yeah,
a sober examination of what's going on, is there not a gas station with nukes? Well, they're
no,
only producing artillery shells. Well, short of nuclear war, it seems like that's what a modern war kind of
right.
devolves to now, where it's
That's
just
right.
trench warfare.
That's right. Well, and even in the nuclear department, as we just showed, the
Well, that
Russians
too,
have us.
yeah.
And, this is, by the way, I think the real reason why Donald Trump is talking about nuclear disarmament. I think because somebody briefed him on the fact that our nuclear arsenal is shit.
Yeah.
And I think he's trying to figure out, how do I buy time?
How do I save face?
And I think that's also why the renewed call. What's the first thing he called for? The day one of his first acts as president again, he signed an executive order mandating the creation of what he calls the Golden Dome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Touch on that. What?
yeah,
Because my buddy brought it up last night when we were playing video games.
yeah.
I thought he was just memeing Iron Dome, Golden Dome. But
No,
you
no.
said it now, so now I
This is
have to.
Yeah, no, this is well, it's predicated on the Iron Dome, but basically what Trump, if you read the executive order from, I guess, January 27th was one of his first days in office. The executive order gets into great detail what he means. So what he's talking about is, yes, he wants to take the Iron Dome system that we helped Israel develop, that has been so good for Israel, protecting it from short-range missile threats, but he wants to incorporate that system with a comprehensive continental-wide, which is very sophisticated, obviously, system. So he wants to incorporate the Iron Dome with the terminal high altitude, the THAAD system. He wants to incorporate that. He wants to incorporate the ground-based mid-course ballistic missile
Patriot.
defense system and the Patriot. He wants that as well. He wants the GMD up in Alaska and I think Washington State. He wants to incorporate this into the Golden Dome. And then he calls for space-based interceptors.
Let's go.
And
Brilliant Pebbles. What was that one under
yeah,
Reagan?
yeah, Star Wars Strategic Defense Initiative. He is talking openly. And by the way, the X-37B space plane
Yeah, the secret
just
guys, yeah.
landed, I think, last week after being up in orbit for another 439 or 38 days.
Those records are so crazy.
They're insane. We've got two of them. My theory is they are going to place a laser in the truck bed of those things, and they're going to incorporate the X-37B into the Golden Dome. But why is this happening now? It's because I think Trump gets into office and somebody sat him down. Maybe it was Musk or somebody affiliated, and they're like, look, whatever you thought about our nuclear arsenal, it's not true. It is broken. And
you ever read that? Sorry to interrupt. You ever read that
no, you're good.
about like I think it was with Truman, where he was like, I got to know what the arsenal is. And they're like, well, the Ruskies think we have 100. Some senators say we have 1,000. He's like, yeah, what is it? And like, they bring him in, and I don't think the guy even said it. I think he wrote it down. And they're like, Truman's like, well, listen, I don't think we need more than 400 or 500. And he didn't even say it in case there was a wiretap. So the general just writes down 13 and slides it over to, and Truman just went like, no one not even the U.S. knew. Like LeMay thought we had more, and Truman was like, "Gotta play it cool, don't freak out."
Yeah,
but just like, oh, we have 13.
Right.
I thought we had hundreds, and they're like, no.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And so it's a similar moment for Trump, except in some ways it's worse because back then we still had scalability. We had a defense industrial base that could churn out.
And I think this was pre-49, which means the Soviets didn't even have it yet.
Right, exactly.
This isn't even that case.
Right. But today we don't have first of all, what was told to me, I'll never forget, the Reagan era undersecretary of the Air Force wrote a series of books. He's dead now, I think. He was very old. And he came to the Institute of World Politics where I was getting my master's from, and he gave a book talk. And he and I hit it off. And I can't remember his name now. But I'll have to look it up again. But he and I hit it off. And he was a nuclear physicist by training. He actually worked with Ed Teller, was his claim to fame. New Teller and all these guys. And he told me, he said, Brandon, the plutonium cores on a lot of our land-based ICBMs might not even work anymore. So when we go to launch them, they might not even launch. And that was 20.
You mean detonate?
Yeah, detonate. Yeah. Well, then he was talking also about how they might not even launch. There's a whole other thing with the missiles themselves. But that was back in 2013 or 14. And it's gotten worse since then because Obama, his whole thing in 2012 was he wanted to do complete unilateral disarmament. Now, he never obviously did it, but
Didn't
what he
Obama
started,
also do the modernization thing? The ICBM modernization.
yeah, there was a move toward
Just
that,
trying.
but
I'm trying to give credit where it's due. I think he
but
did
he
sign
did.
that.
You're right. He did. Yes, but what he was doing was he was limiting under the New START treaty that we signed with Russia. He was limiting our ability to modernize. This is one of the reasons we don't have enough nukes. And then Trump came in the first time, and he started to really modernize. But I just thought it was very interesting. I thought he would do the same thing when he became president again, but Trump actually is going the other way. He's saying he wants to cancel the nuclear weapons arsenal. And I think it's because somebody sat him down and was like, look, we've tried and it's just
don't work.
they don't work. There's not enough of them. They're too old.
Yeah.
We don't have a defense industrial base that can replace them
It'd
quickly
be
enough.
fucking hilarious if Putin had talked to Trump and been like, "Ours don't work either. How do we save
Wouldn't that be
face?"
great?
That'd
Yeah,
be the
wouldn't that be
funniest
great?
thing in the world. If they're like,
Wouldn't that be that would be almost preferable to what we have now.
yeah, and they'd be
and
like,
the
and they both like, and China doesn't know, so let's shut the fuck up.
right, right. Well, the crazy thing is China, their nuclear development is scaring the shit out of me.
Yeah,
And because we signed all these treaties under Gorbachev and Reagan. Like for
yeah.
instance,
None of these matter because China doesn't.
China wasn't a signatory to them. So like the intermediate range nuclear forces agreement that Trump got us out of in 2018, everybody was freaking out. Putin was pissed at him. Everybody was angry. Oh, you're going to start World War III. People didn't realize Pompeo said it at the time and nobody listened. The real reason that Trump was open to it was because he knew only Russia and China, and only Russia and America, rather, not China, had signed on to the INF. China was given a free hand that meant. They were able to develop as many intermediate range nuclear forces as they wanted to. And believe me, they did by 2018. And so, China's had a lot of free hand to operate. What's more, unlike Russia and the United States, which try to be open with each other about what they have so they avoid nuclear war,
Yeah.
the Chinese are purposely opaque about what they have and what they can do. And so that creates a lot of uncertainty. Russia and America had the red line throughout the Cold War, the hotline where they could de-escalate directly, deconfliction line. The Chinese purposely do not want a deconfliction capability.
So that comes all the way back to the space dominance hysteria about how, yeah, I mean there was still some level of like civility where I think it was it Richard Bissell who was who wanted to, I don't know if they ever officially did it, but like the flyover agreement where they were like,
like open skies.
we're like like Soviets, like we won't shoot you down if you come and monitor our stuff because ultimately that's in both of our interests. So you can come see and go, okay, look, no, their silos are closed. There is that level. All of this only matters when everyone is playing. My dollar bills only matter because everyone is agreeing that when I go to the store and I get some chicken and oranges, they take dollar bills.
That's right.
None of that matters when someone rolls up with a gun, which is why you have the police and that's why you have the Second Amendment. So in case somebody wants to escalate, you can immediately escalate too.
That's right.
China's not playing the dollar game where we go, hey, open skies, red line, because we both don't want this entire thing to get vaporized because that's no good. China's not playing that, they don't want it. And so if you do that and you go, well, they're not playing the treaty thing, well, so it doesn't matter. And by the time you go, well, they're not playing the treaty thing, you don't want to have to go, okay, well, let's start developing weapons because China's not playing the treaty. You have to have them ready.
Yeah.
Like I don't wait until somebody breaks into my house to go, maybe I should look into a gun. I have a gun. I hope I don't ever have to use it. But it's there in case somebody doesn't want to play by the rules of this is my apartment and the door locks.
That's
right. So China's not playing by that.
No.
So none of this, if we go, well, what about, I don't know, space proliferation treaties or weapons and space treaties or, well, hey, what about when China builds their own tokamak reactor? What about when China builds their own, a space station? When they want to we go, well, nobody should inhabit the moon. You have to enforce that. You have to enforce that. Well, what are we going to do? Tell China, like, hey, we've all agreed that we're not. China's going to say, fuck off. And rightfully so, because that is the power that rules the world. Sorry for
no, you're good. The Moon Agreement of 1979, which explicitly says you're not allowed to take property on the moon as a nation or company.
It's an agreement.
It's an agreement, but there's two countries that didn't sign on to it. They didn't ratify it. The United States did not ratify it, and the People's Republic of China did not ratify it. And I actually don't think that the Soviets ultimately signed on to
Yeah,
it.
so it doesn't
It's still waiting, since 79. And actually, if I remember correctly, it was actually the Soviets who led the resistance to it, not the Americans. Because what the Americans did, like we always do with these treaties that we don't sign, the deep state, the bureaucracy comes in and basically quietly makes regulations so that it's easier for us to ultimately accept the treaty, even if we don't sign it.
Yeah.
And so we try, our bureaucracy comes in and tries to make the regulations and to standardize what we're doing with what the treaty says. Even if our leaders say we're not signing it, we're still going to be administratively adhering to it. The Chinese and the Russians, they don't do that. If they don't want it, they don't do it. Period. There's no like counter state there that's saying, oh, we need to still comport because we might get a leader who will want to sign it and we want to streamline this. The bureaucracy in DC is very much opposed to any kind of space militarization. It goes back to the 60s. There's this utopianism about it. They don't want it. They don't think it's worth it. They think it's going to destabilize great power relationships. So they are inherently opposed to it, even though you have a power like China, which has made it very clear. And this was what Yi Jian, who's the head of China's lunar program in 2019, he said this to the Wall Street Journal. He said, Beijing, we view the universe as an ocean and the moon as the South China Sea. And he then added on, he said, if we don't go to the moon and into space for our country, then another great power will come and prevent us from going into space and going to the moon. And our children will demand to know why we didn't take those things when we could. That is what he told the Wall Street Journal. And I have that full quote in the first chapter of my book, Winning Space. So that is what the head of their lunar program is saying in 2019. So they have been very clear this whole time about what their objectives are with space, but also with high technology in general. They want to dominate what they call the fourth industrial revolution: biotech, hypersonic, space, quantum computing, all of it.
Yeah.
All of it. Yeah. They're very clear. It's militarization.
And I don't disagree with anything they're saying.
No, because this is what we did in the 20th century. It's what the British
this
did
is what
in the 19th century.
Do.
Right.
What they're doing is what you have to do to win. If everyone else has to talk about an agreement, then what is like the king doesn't have to say he's the king, right? It's you just are. No. Right. The lion doesn't have to explain to you why he's the. He'll just rip your fucking throat out.
Right.
And you don't have to like it. And you can say it's bad. It's good. But ultimately, the only way to really go is to secure it for yourself. And then if you are the hegemon, you can decide not to use the force, and that's how you can make the world.
And that's what the story of America was. That's
the story of the human race.
But in terms of letting other people in, I mean, we much more so than the Chinese ever would. We have let everybody in, and we operate with them, and we want more people involved.
It's best case scenario. It's the least worst hegemon.
That's right.
All right. So if China's in charge, there might not be some agreement. They might blow all your shit out of the sky, make an orbital shield, and go, no, we're now in solar system China, and we're keeping you guys the same way you keep endangered species around. We just want to.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, they want to use. I mean, my friend David Goldman, who writes under the pseudonym sometimes of Spangler. He's the editor. He was my editor at Asia Times. He wrote a great book called "You Will Be Assimilated." And it was all about China's tech dominance and what they're doing. His whole thing has always been, he said, China wants to keep America as a resource colony. They do not want to kill America. They don't want to see us, completely destroyed. They want to use us as like protein to feed off of. That's what they want. They want us to be subordinated to them, yes, but ultimately they want America. They would love it if America goes back to being like has a trading profile of Brazil.
They want us to be a big Foxconn factory.
That's right.
And so it all comes down to, it's like, I wish no one in the world needed a gun. Of course, I wish it was kumbaya. I would rather have a gun and be able to choose not to use it than you have a gun and me hope you don't use it. But I wish there was no guns. Cool. You can wish all you want and you
Right.
can pray for a rainbow. Go
That's
for
right.
it. I would rather have the U.S. with a thousand reactors and a bunch of nukes orbiting in space and 9 military outposts on Pluto. And then I'd rather us have the argument about, well, do we need a 10th Pluto outpost? And yeah, no, we
Right.
probably don't. And I'm sure Grumman's grifting some money off of it. And there are
Right.
all the flaws that come with that. I get it. I would rather have that than say, I hope the Chinese don't choose my lineage today to do genetic tests on.
That's right.
I would just rather be on top of the hill and choose to let other people also climb the hill than instead of being at the bottom being like, well, this is it's like there's nothing more impotent than when you see like just somebody like some grown man bitching on Facebook about capitalism. You're like, there's
Right.
nothing more impotent than just
Right.
saying you're greedy. It's like,
Right.
does your wife even love you? Like,
Right.
do you have a shred of testosterone in your body? Go out and better yourself. Muscular, go hit the gym. And it's so there's just nothing more impotent than that. And like if we so when you look at China as militaristic and they're aggressive, no, Homo sapiens are.
Right.
We are the aberration by saying
Right.
we should do this.
Well, we've become the impotent superpower. I
It's
mean, that's
so
what we've been made
embarrassing.
into. And I think on some level this is what Trump is running into. And this is why they tried to remove him. This is why they tried to assassinate him. This is why they tried, because whoever's really controlling our country wants America to be gelded. They want America to be impotent. Yes, we still have power, but we don't really use it effectively. And we're not doing big, great things anymore.
Yeah.
We're not. And that's, that has been the result of this Byzantine government that we've created since FDR's time. And it is not a system that is, and this is why now when he's president, he's waking up to the fact that, holy shit, my defense industrial base doesn't work. And oh my God, I can't produce weapons that I need to survive. We can't even extract energy the way we need to.
Yeah.
We're not, we haven't really, and this is Peter Thiel's thing since 2014. He wrote that book from, what is it, 0 to 1. He talks a lot about how the big ticket technologies we don't produce anymore. It's all software shit. It's
Service
apps.
economy. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't actually like we don't build reactors anymore. And we
No.
don't, we don't do the things that men used to do a century ago that built the world as we know it.
And we're riding on inertia. If we
And
go, well, we don't
and
need it. We're
yes,
the number one superpower.
right.
And it's like, no. We were the number one industrial producer
Yes,
forever. And sure, you go, well, we've been this way for decades. Well, in the lifespan of empires, you're riding on
right.
inertia. You're going,
And that
uh,
inertia is running
yeah,
out.
you go, we don't need to fly any faster. We're going 700 miles an hour. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, it's because we went full throttle, 4 engines with the
Right.
fuel. And yeah, sure, we got a nice view. We're at cruising altitude, but there's another plane way back there with afterburners. And you can't look at
Right.
it and go, well, it's all the way back there. Right now it is.
Right.
And then when it passes you with a shock wave, you're going to be very surprised.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's what yeah, sure, right now we are getting by on, I don't know, exporting Disney movies and NBA season tickets. Like, not forever. It does
Not forever.
eventually. How did we win World War II? Was it our software? No, it was just so many planes it blotted
right.
out the sun.
That's right. But
So
just
many
remember,
tanks that you couldn't see the ground. Like,
you and I spoke about this before. But in many respects, Nazi technology was superior, especially at the start of the war,
yeah.
to American and British tech. And it really was just our mass production that was able to override and overwhelm the Axis powers. And it was also the fact that we were partnered with Russia. I mean, people forget about that. The partnership with Russia was very reptilian. We didn't like them. They didn't like, I mean, I think parts of the FDR administration
Probably
liked them a
those
little too much.
cocksuckers.
But generally speaking, we didn't like the Russians. The Russians didn't like
Yeah,
us.
no,
We
it
were
was.
eyeing each other. We knew after the war we were going to turn on each other.
Yeah,
But
no,
damn
yeah,
it,
it was.
for that period of time,
They
we
didn't like
used.
Japan.
Yep.
Germany stabbed them in the back, ruined their
Yep.
friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so today we're in a very similar position with China, where China is closely aligned with Russia. How do we separate that? Because we cannot rely exclusively on our ability to mass produce or to create new technologies quickly that outpace our enemies anymore.
I would love. Don't have it on my bingo card, but man, there would be nothing better than just like us allying with the Soviet Union or with Russia again
Well, I
to
think
take
it's
on an Asian
happening.
country. I would
No, I
fucking
think it's
love it.
happening.
And why
I
wouldn't
think
it? But like no memeing. Like realistically, why wouldn't you? If if you're eyeing a
right,
rising China, the single best thing you can do
right.
is to take away because it's like in the MLB where like Red Sox Yankees. If the Yankees lose a game and the Red Sox win a game, you don't go down by half. It's you both
Right.
exchange, so that the difference becomes you're leading or you're winning by one game. You
That's right.
take away Russia from China, that's a massive ally. They lose. You add it, that's a massive ally. You
That's
gain
right.
it. It's a double
Which,
whammy.
which is why this Elon Musk Roscosmos thing is so hopeful
It's
because
very big.
from that, if they do it, from that, you can build out. And already you're seeing Trump clearly enjoys his relationship with Putin much more than he does with Zelensky. And so, I mean, I think that phone call today between Zelensky and Trump, they're not saying it, but the fact of the matter is, there's the readout. Normally, after a diplomatic call, you saw this with Putin and Trump. The readouts are released by the governments that were involved almost immediately for everybody to see. The readout for the Trump Zelensky meeting, which was an hour and a half phone call, was not released. Trump came out and said it was a great conversation, but it was a very clinical analysis, which I actually think was not a great conversation. And then right before we started recording, it took a reporter in the press pool asking Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, for a readout, and she verbally read it, but no actual readout has been released, which indicates to me they're scrubbing it because it was a really bad call. And what I'm getting at with this is Trump and Putin now are more aligned on the
Mm.
biggest issue in Russia, which is Ukraine, than we've ever been, which actually now also allows for us to build off of that. And Ukraine's going to be the sacrificial lamb.
As they were going to always be, no matter what.
As that's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, it's the only way this was ever going to end. Otherwise, was
Because we have
Russia and
bigger
China.
fish to fry.
Exactly. No, it's much,
Yeah.
and it's like, what did you think all these sanctions against Russia were going to do? You think that China was going to be like, yeah, well, no, they were pairing up, and now you're pairing
Yeah.
two now you're taking two near peer competitors, and you're making a monolith
Yes.
that's you
Yes.
can't work with.
And
So
so,
it's well, I don't like. Well, again, this is the history of mankind.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
grow the up.
And we're blessed enough to not have to live in a country that borders any of these
Yeah,
places.
we are so blessed to
You
be
know,
in the United
you
States, which
know,
is still a military powerhouse separated
right,
by two oceans with two mountain ranges and a
right.
ton of resources. We're looking from our castle over there. Like,
That's
hey,
right.
count your lucky fucking
That's right.
stars
That's right.
that we're where
That's
we
right.
are now.
And Russia, it's a little bit different. I mean, they've got a rough neighborhood, and
Yeah.
they've got China coming up on their backside, and the Russian Far East is the most valuable property of Russia, and it's the least populated, and it's the one that the Chinese really want.
Yeah.
And so I think if Trump can flip Putin or at least move Putin to the neutral column, we've got a big chance to really kind of get our footing back in terms of being the dominant power.
We've been going for an hour and a half. I just looked at
Yeah.
my phone. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
just did too. No, you're
Yeah,
good.
that
You're
was
good.
fun.
I get talking and I don't shut
I
up.
get
So
revved up. I start screaming,
yeah.
and I keep having to like adjust I'm literally just turning into an old man, screaming about China, the threat of China, as I'm like my neck.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, ultimately, one, it's bigger fish to fry, but it's also like, yeah, we also do got to take a step back from like the precipice of World War III.
Yeah, we do.
Like, I mean,
Because we're going to lose.
yeah, we're
We're
all
going to
gonna
lose.
lose.
Yeah, we're all going to lose, but America will lose first.
You don't know. We'll lose a conventional one,
Yeah.
and then if it goes thermonuclear, there is no. So it's
Yeah, but
you can Slava Ukraine all you want, man.
yeah, but just to be clear, I'm no longer convinced we would win a nuclear war.
No. I
Yeah,
didn't. No. We
or
would
like
lose a conventional
yeah,
build-up war.
yeah,
If it goes thermonuclear, we will all lose. Is what I mean.
yes, yes.
I don't
see.
mean we're gonna win. No.
But there's also a
I'm saying we
chance.
I'm either saying all of
Yeah,
humanity
got
loses
it,
or the
got it.
U.S. loses.
Because there's also a chance that the Russians and Chinese in geosynchronous orbit have the capability to
maybe they
knock
do
out
shoot
our
down our shit.
Well, they have the ability to knock out our NC3 functions, nuclear command,
Yeah.
communication, and control.
I just finished
And
Command
it,
and Control by Eric Schlosser.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And if they knock out those systems, then they've just disconnected the American nuclear triad.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a chance, they could theoretically do significant damage to our ability to even threaten world destruction with the thermonuclear, and those systems might not even work.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
the point I'm getting at is it seems to be that there's no winning move right now,
no, right, right.
except, and I know this is gonna sound crazy, maybe we should settle on peace. I
We
don't know.
should,
Maybe
yes.
I don't know.
And it
Maybe
starts with Russia. It
yeah.
starts with settling on peace with
You
Russia.
don't have to like, hey, yeah, it doesn't look too enthusiastic when you see dudes being thrown in a van to go get grounded in
Yeah.
nothingness on. Hey, man, there's no like, fuck off. What is
And the
this?
Russians haven't lost any territory. They've taken on all of NATO through
Yeah,
Ukraine.
it's very
and they
easy to
haven't
stand
lost.
around and scream Slava Ukraine. Hey, man,
Right.
it's not you and your brothers being
Right.
thrown in there. All right, I
Mhm.
think it would change very quickly if I found out, my older and younger brother both get drafted. I lucked
Yeah.
out. I missed it. It gets a little closer to home, and
Yeah.
that's what it is. So it's, yeah. But dude, as always, that was
It's
fun.
great.
It's
It was fun.
That was
Yeah.
fantastic.